How can you absolutely influence another person to do what you want and to absolutely have the power in the conversation, in the sales meeting, any of these contexts where this is into play? The most important thing, foundationally, to understand is that in every one-to-one or one-to-many interaction, there is always a frame surrounding that interaction. And the frame really dictates what anything you say means, who is more valuable, who is not, what the overarching meaning is of the whole interaction. So I'll give you an example of a frame. You could have a frame in a sales meeting of the buyer and the seller. And by the way of communicating, by the way of being, you will enforce that frame or not. Now, the buyer could even be the seller if he is just coming from a frame of like, I'm trying to sell myself to this person who I want his coaching because, he's so abundant or whatever, right? That's just an example. But ultimately, you want to always be the buyer in the frame because that is a frame that's going to allow you to get people to come to you instead of you selling to them. So if you're the buyer, you're simply the person in the interaction who is setting the tone, who is saying, I'm going to work with you or not, who is the decider. And the seller in the interaction is always the person who's trying to sell themselves to the buyer, who's trying to tell them why they're good enough, trying to tell them why they should work with him or her, who's telling the girl why she should date him or not, all these things. And the frame, how you can instill this frame is really, first of all, there's a lot of people that say these communication tactics and tricks and whatever, but the first thing that's important is actually checking in with what place are you coming from before you enter an interaction. What frame are you yourself coming from? And that really comes down to your belief systems. So if you come into an interaction with a belief system, you come from this place, from this identity of, oh, I need to sell myself to this person, I'm not good enough, any of these types of things, that's not going to be workable for a result of influence in that interaction. But if you shift that and you come from a place and a frame of like, hey, I'm already abundant, I have everything I need, nobody can give me anything, and I already have more clients than I know what to do with, and more girls to date and whatever that I know what to do with, any of these types of things, now you're coming from abundance. Now you're coming from a place of power. Now you're coming from a place of confidence. And from that place, you're going to be able to influence at a much higher rate. As Donald Trump said, the person who's not willing to walk away from the table is always going to have lower end of the deal. And that's absolutely fucking true. Because if you're not willing to walk away from the table because you don't feel that you're abundant, you're going to get the shortest end of the stick. Just because the other person is willing to walk away and you're willing to take a less good deal because you're not coming from abundance. So check in with yourself. What place are you coming from? And then enforce that frame by automatically communicating that way. But you gotta believe it first. That's the first step. How would you act? What would you say if you were absolutely coming from abundance, absolutely coming from self-esteem, confidence, all these things? Then you'd probably say, hey, what makes you good enough to work with us? Probably not in that bland of a way, but like you would ask questions that imply that meaning. You would ask questions like, hey man, are you someone who really wants to go to a next level, or are you not sure about it yet? Are you someone that, is decisive and takes action when we stipple out a plan? Or, you're someone who thinks about it. You're asking qualification questions. You're the qualifier. So make sure you come from the right place and the right belief system, and you will absolutely influence a whole lot more effectively.